Hi everyone. For our first lab in the course, we will introduce you to the operating system known as Unix. Specifically, we'll show you how to use Unix with a command line interface, also known as simply a command line or a terminal. The command line or terminal provides an interface in which you give the computer specific commands to tell the computer what to do and how to do it. This allows us to be able to perform neuroimaging analyses flexibly and efficiently. We will also cover the concepts of a computer file system and a path on that file system. Understanding the organization of the file system and its many paths will ultimately be highly valuable for when we begin to utilize different types of neuroimaging software. Finally, we'll show you how to run some basic commands in the terminal. These commands will be heavily used throughout the entire course in our labs, so understanding and mastering these early will be important for later exercises. This video will introduce you to the concepts covered in the lab, as well as provide some basic examples of using the terminal from our VirtualBox virtual machine. The slides that have been posted to Canvas provide additional details and examples for you to try yourselves. Go through the slides carefully and follow the instructions. The exercises within the slides will guide you through the examples and help you better understand how to use Unix and the command line. Very important for later labs and exercises. Note, there is no formal lab report due for this lab. Instead, we have posted a worksheet that should be completed over the next week and handed in through Canvas. Please let us know if you have any questions or are unable to access any of the files. Okay, let's get started. Unix is a command line interface, as I've said before. And what that means is that instead of pointing and clicking, like you might be familiar with either your Windows or Mac operating system, we use the command line or terminal to run specific processes and tell the computer what to do. So instead of pointing and clicking on a file, we would use the terminal and give it a specific command to tell it to open it, for example. Or to make a new folder or directory. On a Mac or a Windows machine, you might be familiar with right-clicking and creating new folder, creating a new directory. On a command line, we would give it a command to tell the computer to make a new directory. So what is the terminal? The terminal is a text-based command line interface. What that means is that, again, we give the computer specific commands for it to do. The terminal is a basic navigator for using the computer and accessing files, programs, and software necessary for research. And instead of pointing and clicking with a mouse, you type the commands into a terminal to run specific processes. And these commands are typed with very specific syntax. Learning the command line takes a lot of practice and a lot of trial and error. But as you become more proficient in it, it will allow you to be quicker and more efficient when processing and analyzing data. And the main reason for using the command line and teaching you this is that many of our software packages that will be used throughout the class and just in neuroimaging in general, like AFNI, FSL, Ematrix, were developed to be used with the command line. So we will use these we'll use the command line and terminal throughout the entirety of the course. So what is the file system and directory structure? Like any operating system, like Mac or Windows, Unix organizes files and folders into a directory structure. Understanding this structure and being able to navigate the directory structure with the command line or terminal will be very important. Files in Unix system are organized in what is known as a multi-level hierarchy structure, also known as a directory tree. An example of this structure can be seen here in this figure. At the very top of the file system is called the root, and it's represented by this /. All other folders or directories and files are descendants of this root. For example, we have various paths that descend from this root. For example, bin, dev, etc, home, lib, mount, proc, root, sbin, temp, user. The bin also has various descendants: cp, ksh, is, pwd, and so does home, mthomas, stool. Mthomas has further descendants: bin, class underscore stuff, profile, and so on and so forth. You can see that this provides a nice organization from which different files and folders are located on the computer. This file system provides a way to organize the various files and software that are on this computer, as well as gives a way to access in a location to access these different files. Navigating the directory structure is analogous to pointing and clicking on a folder on your desktop or documents folder and seeing what's inside. Instead, the main difference is that instead of using the mouse to navigate the file system by pointing and clicking, we have to use the terminal or command line and give these things commands to do this. So there's no mouse. The following commands will be used to navigate the file system: cd, or change directory; ls, which stands for list or list contents of the current folder or directory; and pwd, print working directory, which shows your current location in the file system. Let's look at this for a bit more closely on our VirtualBox machine. And I'm going to go ahead and open up our VirtualBox machine, and I'm going to open Okay, so I've logged into our VirtualBox machine. Now, this is what your desktop should look like when you first open your VirtualBox machine. You should see a folder here on your desktop called Neuro, and you should also see a trash bin. We have a dock with various applications and icons. You see the first application we'll see is our terminal. You have Firefox web browser, Thunderbird Mail, which is a mail application, the files folder, and some various other things that we won't necessarily need to worry about right now. The main thing that we'll focus on today is this terminal application. So go ahead, I'm going to click on that, and you will see that it immediately opens up our command line in terminal. So this is where we will enter and put in all of the different commands that we would want to give the computer to run. I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger by doing a Control Shift and plus, just so that it makes it easier to see everything. Okay, perfect. So the three commands that we're going to focus on right now are pwd, ls, and cd. As I said, print working directory, list contents, and change directory. So the first one, pwd, like I said, stands for print working directory. And if I just type pwd and hit enter, you'll see that the terminal prints out a path on our file system, home neuro. So what is this file? What is this path? This path, by default, when we first open a command line, is our home home directory. And because our username is neuro, our home directory for the username directro is home neuro. Pretty simple. If I do an ls and list the contents of our home directory, you'll see a various different number of folders and files. Specifically, you'll see a desktop and documents directory, which are exactly the desktop and documents folders on your VirtualBox machine. You also see downloads, music, pictures, public, snap, templates, videos, so on and so forth. So these are various directories that are located on your home directory. To navigate to one of those directories, we would use the cd or change directory command. So to do so, cd, we would change directory, and following the call for change directory, you would then give it a path on the file system. So for example, I could say cd desktop, and what this is actually a relative path. So it's relative, meaning that desktop is relative to my current location, or my current location on the my current location on the file system. Another way of navigating to the desktop would be providing the full path, which would be home neuro. So our home directory, which is our current location, / desktop, which would be the desktop. If I hit enter, you can see that here now changes to desktop, saying that that's where we currently are. And if I do a pwd, print working directory, print my current location on the file system, it tells me that I am on home neuro desktop, and meaning that I am inside my desktop. And if I do an ls here and list the contents of the desktop, you can see that there is nothing there. Now, if I wanted to go back to my home directory, there's a couple ways to navigate back. One shortcut is to use the tilde operator. This tilde stands for our home directory. So if I just do cd and tilde and hit enter, this would take us back to our home directory. And just to show you that, let me do pwd, and you can see we're back home. Okay, so let me go back to the desktop really quick to show you another way to go back to our home directory. So you could, so just for example, the cd tilde you could call anywhere, and that will just automatically take you back to your home directory no matter where you are on the file system. Another way to go back a directory or back to our home directory would be to use the ... or yes, ... So what this ... stands for is to go back one directory. Because the desktop is a descendant of our home directory, going back one directory from the desktop would put us inside our home directory. And again, you can see that we're now located on tilde. If I do a pwd, we are at home neuro. Let me go back to the desktop just to show you another way. Now, another way would be just to spell out the path to our home directory, which would be home neuro. And again, if I do that, you can see it takes us back there. So there are 3 different ways to go back to our home directory. Okay, so let's go back to our desktop. I'm going to do CD desktop. And I'm going, like I said, if I do an ls, you can see that nothing is listed. So there's essentially nothing on our desktop, and you can kind of see that there's no files or other directories currently located on our desktop. The trash bin and our home directory, just to note, will not show when you do this ls. But what we can do is actually make a couple files really quickly and show that that those actually get placed on our desktop. So to create a simple text file, a simple command to do that would be touch. So this we can just use to make a file. We'll call it myfile.txt. If I touch, you should see that a file gets created on my desktop called myfile. If I do an ls, you see that my file is now listed on my desktop, and it's there as well. And then I could create another file. We'll say myfile2.txt, and you'll see that, we'll refresh here in a second, myfile2 gets created. And if I do ls, you can see that indeed there are two files now on our desktop. Perfect. So that's a simple way. If you need to create simple files, you can use this touch command, and that can be very handy. And again, you'll use that when you go through the exercises in the slides, as well as we'll use that throughout the course. Now I'm going to show you two other commands. One being how to copy a file, and how to rename a file. So for copying a file, the command is cp. And cp, or copy, requires that you give the command two different arguments, or two different paths, as it were. So the first one would be the input, or the file that you're wanting to copy. So for example, let's say we wanted to copy my file.txt. We would say cp my file. This is the file that we're wish to copy, and then you would give it the path to where you want to copy this file. So instead of copying it to my desktop, let's copy it to the documents folder. So on our home drive. So we would say home, neuro, documents, and I'm going to say my file copied. Oops. Text. Okay, and hit enter. All right, so let's just do an ls, so you can still see those two files are currently on our desktop. Now let's go to our documents folder, and if I do an ls, you should see that now my file copied is there. So it copied my file from the desktop, copied it to documents, and renamed it my file copied.txt. That's how. So for the copy command, you give it to recap, you give it an input. So for example, our input was myfile.txt, and then a location, which again for our location purposes was the documents folder, and we called the new file myfile copied. Okay. So let's try something else there. I'm going to go back our desktop. So here's again just another little trick. So currently I'm in my documents folder, which is a descendant of my home directory. So I'm going to go back one directory, which will take me to my home, and then I can go right to the desktop all in one command. So if I so that takes me then right to the desktop without having to do two different CDs. And this is a very common way for navigating the file system, and very efficient once you really kind of master master the organization of the file system. This will become very secondhand to you as well. Okay, so I'm back on the desktop. Let's rename the myfile.txt or myfile2.txt. Let's rename that and call that my new file. So to rename a file, we're going to use the command mv or move. So we're going to say mv myfile2.txt. So just like copy, this command takes two arguments. The first argument is the file that you want to rename, and the second one is the argument that you or the new name for the file. So we said my new file.txt. Oops, my new file.txt. Okay, if I do that, you see that on the desktop it updates the name. If I do an ls, you see that that file has also been given a new name. Great. So that is a quick example of how to use the move or rename command. Another command that will be very important is to remove different files. To do so, we're going to use the rm command, which stands for remove. And for this, you can just give it a file. And then you can, this can also be a list of files. So I could give it the my file and the my new file and hit enter, and you'll see that those files are now removed from our desktop. And if I type ls, you can see that those files no longer exist. So rm can take as little as one argument, but it can also take as many different files that you give it. Now, one thing to note is that unlike when you drag a file to the trash in Mac or Windows, these files that you remove, once you type this command, they're unrecoverable. You won't be able to get those back. They don't go to the trash bin like they do. So just be careful when using that command particularly. Another command that is very handy is the one that you just saw. Is called clear. Sometimes it's very handy to just clear away the terminal so that you don't have all the different commands that you just had. So all you do is you type clear and hit enter, and everything goes away. Okay, so a couple more quick commands before we end this video. Oftentimes we'll want to or need, and it will be useful to make a new directory or a folder, and we can simply use the command mkdir, which stands for make directory. And to do so, again, you just supply it with the directory name, the path, and directory name that you want to create. So for example, I'm going to call this my new directory. It should create a new folder or directory for us on our desktop, and you can see that here. It creates it there. And if I do an ls, you see that here. Now, one thing to note, I'm going to just create a file called myfile. Oops. myfile.txt. Now, one thing to note is that on our VirtualBox machine, files are color-coded white, and directories are color-coded in this blue color, so you kind of can quickly determine if something, when you do an ls, is either a file or a directory. Okay, so the other way to make a directory would again be to give it the full path. We could say mkdir. So I could use this tilde say, so that would go to the home slash, and let's say I wanted to make a new thing on the desktop and say lab1. And again, this will make a new directory here on the desktop, and it should be called lab1, and you can see it there. If I do an ls to list the contents of our desktop folder slash directory, we see that lab1 is now there as well. Okay, and like just like how we could copy things to our desktop from our documents folder, I could copy my file.txt to, say, my new directory, right? And then if I list the contents of, I can list the contents of my new directory, my new directory folder by doing this, and you can see that my file is also inside of my new directory. I can list the contents of lab1, and there should be nothing there because we just created it. We didn't put anything in there yet. We could rename a directory. Using the same move or rename command like we did for the files, we could say move lab1. So we're going to rename that lab1 folder to be lab1 updated. We'll save this. And you see that it does update or change, rename that lab1 folder. Now, removing a directory is a little different than removing a file. So if I try to do remove lab1 updated, you'll get an error saying cannot remove lab1 updated is a directory. So this rm command only works for files. It does not work for directories. So usually for removing a directory, we're going to use this rm-r, which is an option for the remove command. And this option specifically says to perform this remove recursively, which means that it will delete all files and all subdirectories within the folder that you specify. In this case would be lab1 updated. And if I do that, you can see that it will remove that directory. And if I do the same thing for my new directory, it removes everything inside my new directory, which again, recall we had this myfile.txt in there, and so now that's completely gone. Okay, so this is just a quick and brief introduction to some very basic and simple commands, but very powerful commands that we will use throughout the course and the lab exercises. The slides that we've posted to Canvas provide additional examples of using these commands, as well as a few other different commands that we will continue to go over this week and in the next week. Please follow through the slides and the directions in the slides, complete the exercises that we're asking you to complete, and really practice using these command line tools. These like I said, these are very powerful tools that will be heavily relied on throughout the course, and it will be critical that you understand how to use these and really master these now, because the neuroimaging tools really rely on a strong understanding of the file system and using and manipulating that file system with these very basic commands. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact myself, Drs. Byrne or Alexander, or any of the TAs for any help that you may need or any trouble that you might be having. And also complete the worksheet and hand that in through Canvas in the following week. Thanks.